The Nintendo Switch 2 might not be what you're expecting. Remember the moment you first picked up a Nintendo Switch? That holy crap, I can play Breath of the Wild on the toilet feeling. That magic wasn't just about portability, it was about Nintendo doing what Nintendo does best, making games that feel impossible anywhere else. But as I've been following every leak, every rumor, and every official announcement about the Switch 2, I keep asking the same question. Where are those impossible games? Because right now, the Switch 2 feels less like Nintendo's next big innovation and more like their attempt to become everyone else. Now, let's start with what Nintendo actually changed, because the list is shorter than you might think. The screen got bigger, jumping from 6.2 inches to 7.9 inches. That's nice, but it's still LCD when everyone expected OLED. Now, Nintendo says LCD technology has improved enough to include HDR support, but let's be honest. After using an OLED Steam Deck, this thing feels like a step backward. The Joy-Cons got magnetic, so no more rail system failing after 6 months of Pokemon battles, and the new controllers snap on with satisfying clicks and can somehow work as computer mice. It's genuinely clever, very Nintendo, and probably the most interesting hardware change that they made.
I like it. It's genius.
Now, performance finally matters. We're talking 4K resolution while docked, 1080p handheld, and a refresh rate up to 120 Hz. The NVIDIA Tegra T239 chip includes ray tracing and DLSS support, which sounds impressive until you remember that this is 2025, and every other gaming device has had these features for years. But here's what really matters. Backwards compatibility actually works. Nintendo tested over 15,000 Switch games, and about 75% of them run perfectly on the Switch 2. That's genuinely impressive and probably the console's strongest selling point. But the problem? Everything else feels like Nintendo playing catch-up instead of leading the way. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. If the hardware feels like an incremental upgrade, what's so special about it that's supposed to make us want to spend $450? This is where things get complicated, because the games people are excited about fall into two very different categories. The Nintendo faithful want the exclusives that'll make the $450 price tag worth it. I mean, Mario Kart World looks promising with its open world exploration, though it's hard to get excited when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe just finished adding 48 new tracks and still feels fresh. Donkey Kong Bonanza showcases destructible environments that genuinely couldn't run on the original Switch. Finally, a game that feels like it needs the new hardware. But one platformer doesn't justify a console purchase. The real excitement comes from what's rumored rather than what's confirmed. Animal Crossing fans have been waiting 5 years for a proper sequel, and the series' social gameplay could genuinely benefit from the new game chat features. Assuming anyone actually uses them.
Lisa, how are you going that fast? You don't even have an actual driver's license.
Zelda enthusiasts are hoping the success of Tears of the Kingdom means that we'll see something that truly pushes the Switch 2's capabilities. I mean, imagine what Nintendo EPD could do with ray tracing and DLSS. Realistic lighting in Hyrule or physics systems that make the Ultra Hand seem primitive. Pokemon is always a system seller, but the leaked documents suggest that the 10th generation of games are designed with both Switch models in mind. But here's the most concerning part. If Game Freak is developing for both systems simultaneously, how much will the Switch 2 version actually improve? Scarlet and Violet's technical issues weren't just about hardware limitations. Fire Emblem and Xenoblade Chronicles represented Nintendo's deeper RPG catalog, franchises that could genuinely showcase longer draw distances and more complex battlefields. These are the games where the Switch 2's extra power could translate into meaningfully better experiences rather than just prettier versions of what we already have. The third-party converts are thrilled about finally playing modern AAA games on Nintendo hardware. Seeing Cyberpunk 2077, Elden Ring, and Borderlands 4 running on what's essentially a handheld feels like science fiction. But here's the reality check. Most Nintendo fans already own other consoles. Industry data shows that 60% of Switch owners also had a PS4, and that number has only grown with the PS5 generation. If you wanted to play Cyberpunk 2077, you probably did, and you paid a lot less than the $80 price tag that Nintendo would charge for it. The timing problem makes this even worse. These aren't new games getting simultaneous releases. They are ports of titles that have been heavily discontinued elsewhere. Elden Ring regularly goes on sale for $30 on other platforms, but the Switch 2 version will launch at full price.
Why?
For many gamers, this feels less like getting access to great games and more like paying a Nintendo tax for the privilege of portability. The performance questions also loom large. Yes, the Switch 2 can technically run these games, but at what cost? When developers are targeting 4K 60 FPS on a PS5 and Xbox Series X, what compromises are they making for a handheld device? The magic of the original Switch was that its limitations forced creative solutions. Breath of the Wild's art style, for example, looked timeless precisely because it wasn't chasing photorealism. The criticism isn't just about price, however, though that's certainly the biggest issue. $450 makes the Switch 2 more expensive than a Steam Deck, which can play literally every PC game ever made. Game prices jumping to $80 feels practically tone-deaf when Nintendo's biggest competitors are embracing subscription services and backwards compatibility that doesn't require repurchasing everything.
It's expensive.
But the price complaints mask deeper concerns about Nintendo's direction. The focus on third-party ports during their major Direct presentation felt like admitting the first-party lineup isn't ready. When your big console reveal spends more time showing off 5-year-old games rather than new Nintendo exclusives, something is wrong. The hardware choices puzzle longtime fans. Why LCD instead of OLED? Why maintain the Joy-Con form factor that's never been particularly comfortable? Why make a console that's bigger and heavier when portability was the original's biggest strength? The game chat feature, Nintendo's answer to Discord, feels like arriving to a party 5 years too late.
Am I too late?
The gaming world already solved voice chat, and Nintendo's solution requires a separate button and specific hardware. The battery life situation is particularly concerning as well. Nintendo estimates 2 to 6.5 hours of gameplay, which sounds familiar because it's essentially identical to the original Switch. 7 years of technological advancement, and we are still carrying portable chargers for longer gaming sessions?
Brother,
Meanwhile, the Steam Deck OLED pushes 3 to 12 hours depending on the game. The storage decisions also feel half-hearted. Yes, 256GB is better than the original's 32GB, but when individual games are approaching 100GB, you're still looking at constant microSD card management. The shift to microSD express cards is nice, but it also means your existing storage solutions become obsolete. And most frustrating is the missed opportunities. Nintendo had 7 years to address the Switch's biggest weakness, and while they improved performance and added backwards compatibility, they ignored obvious fixes like better ergonomics, longer battery life, and more reasonable price points. Now, all these individual complaints might seem like nitpicking, but when you step back and look at the complete picture, they reveal something much more significant about Nintendo's strategy. Here's what I think is actually happening. Nintendo is trying to have it both ways, and it might backfire spectacularly. They want to keep the family-friendly, accessible image that made the Switch successful, but they also want to compete directly with the Steam Deck and gaming laptops in the premium handheld space. You can't do both, especially at $450. The original Switch succeeded because it offered something genuinely unique: console-quality Nintendo games that you could play anywhere. The experience was magical enough that people overlooked the underpowered hardware and overpriced accessories. The Switch 2 offers better versions of games you can already play elsewhere, plus the promise of Nintendo exclusives that mostly don't exist yet. Now, Nintendo's biggest risk isn't that the Switch 2 will fail. It's that it'll succeed just enough to validate their move toward becoming a premium brand, abandoning the accessibility that made them special. The real test will come in the first year. If Nintendo can deliver genuinely compelling exclusives that showcase the new hardware, then the price complaints will fade. But if they continue focusing on third-party ports and incremental updates to existing franchises, the Switch 2 could become the Wii U 2, a more powerful console that nobody particularly wanted.
useless.
And that's exactly why this console launch matters so much more than just another hardware cycle. The Nintendo Switch 2's success or failure will determine the future of handheld gaming and Nintendo's place in the industry. If it succeeds, expect every Nintendo console to cost more and target hardcore gamers rather than families. If it fails, Nintendo might retreat back to their budget-conscious roots, or worse, exit the hardware business entirely. For gaming as a whole, the Switch 2 represents a crucial test of whether innovation still matters more than raw power. Nintendo built their reputation on doing things differently, not doing things better than everyone else. For Nintendo fans, this is about more than one console. It's about whether the company that gave us the DS, the Wii, and the original Switch still exists, or if they've decided to become Sony with more colorful characters. The regional pricing disparity adds yet another layer of complexity. In Japan, Nintendo was offering a cheaper, region-locked version for 49,980 yen, compared to the international model's 69,980 yen. This suggests that Nintendo understands price sensitivity exists. They're just not extending that understanding to global markets where their hardware has to compete with more alternatives. The pre-order chaos as well tells its own story. Website crashes, immediate sellouts, and scalper activity all suggest demand exists. But it's unclear whether people are buying because they're genuinely excited or because they're afraid of missing out on limited stock. The original Switch had similar launch issues, but it was also genuinely revolutionary for its time. So where does all this leave us? After analyzing every spec, every game announcement, every pricing decision, and every community reaction, here's my honest take. I want the Nintendo Switch 2 to be amazing. I want it to recapture that original Switch magic while fixing every complaint that we've had for 7 years. But based on everything we know so far, it feels more like Nintendo's attempt to appease critics than delight fans. More powerful? Yes. More expensive? Definitely. More Nintendo? That remains to be seen. My advice? Wait for the actual games. The hardware is fine. I mean, it's not revolutionary, but it's competent. The real question is whether Nintendo will remember what made them special in the first place, or if they'll continue chasing specs that stopped impressing people years ago. The Nintendo Switch 2 might not be what you're expecting, but that could go either way. It might be better than we feared, or it might prove that sometimes the original really is irreplaceable. But what do you think? Are you excited about the Switch 2's focus on power and third-party games, or do you miss the days when Nintendo hardware felt genuinely magical? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious on whether I'm overthinking all of this or if other longtime Nintendo fans share these same concerns. Don't forget to subscribe for more gaming analysis that cuts through the hype, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most anticipated console isn't the one that changes everything.